Hey, say it's a merry way day, up the way, your way. Sun is up, happy, happy, happy day. Love,
And
love,
I don't know if
love,
it's in the millions yet, but
Merry
it's
way
spreading like
day.
wildfire. Why? Because this person has really reinvented himself, and he has come up with something that will really warm your heart, and it's called The Daily Love. And he also has a book out, which we want to talk about too, which is The Daily Love Growing in Grace. But here's the really incredible thing. You may have seen him on Oprah, and she said he's a new thought leader. And my friend Marion Williamson has said that if there's ever anything that you need to know if you feel lost, and some of you kids out there, I know you're writing in all the time saying, what's my direction? What should I do? I'm falling down the rabbit hole. And some of you have even told us that you're taking drugs and so forth. Well, Mastin really has gone through a lot of it himself, and he's young. So hey, guys, he's falling asleep listening to the. No, I'm just teasing. There he is. Welcome, Mastin, and we want to let you know that we have open hearts today for whatever it is you want to share.
Oh, it means a lot. Thank you so much for having me today.
One of the things that you've gone through a journey, and you've even called it the hero's journey in your book, when you got to the point, you had your own history starting out in the music business. Now, what were you doing there?
Well, the journey that I sort of speak to in the book, I call it the crisis to grace cycle, and it came from an observation that I learned from a man named Joseph Campbell, who really invented the hero's journey. And the beginning of my story, like any other story, is kid from Kansas, big dreams, wants to go change the world, and moves to Hollywood, and very quickly gets caught up in sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, party scene, and really hit a major rock bottom at a very young age in the entertainment business. And when I decided to get clean and sober the first time, my real observation was I wanted to feel as good off the drugs as I did on the drugs. And that's when I started getting into the world of personal growth. And, I started reading, the first self-help book I ever read was The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey from Bought It at Kinko's. And when it was called Kinko's, was just really curious, like, why wasn't I aware of this information earlier? And that kind of put me down a deep rabbit hole into the personal growth space. And I started to realize how valuable all this information was that I was learning, and something that could have, helped me in my job and help, I didn't die from an overdose. I was reviewing my drug history recently with a counselor, thinking, man, I really got out. I was a lucky one to get out. But having this information sooner could have really had a much more positive impact on my life. So I really decided, I'm gonna take all this information and package it and present it in a way that's accessible to people my age, and do it in a way where there's social media involved, and email, and I've been sharing this information since MySpace days. So in the technology world, you might as well be talking about the 1900s. So it's just been a journey, and I really think some people have called me a leader as this book has come out, and I find that humbling. But I really think that the reason why sites like The Daily Love are resonating, and stories like mine are resonating, has nothing to do with me, and more has to do with the times, and really people are needing this content and this information, and I just happened to decide to start sharing it with no knowledge or any clue that other people really needed it as sort of importantly as they do. And so I've been very blessed to have this, no longer be a hobby, and to make it a full-time job and business, and to really have the ability to really, at this point in my life, make it about giving back, and helping other people shorten their learning curve. Because for me, it was a very long process. And so the book that I wrote, Growing into Grace, really, it's a decade of my knowledge, and you can read it in a couple hours or maybe a day or two. That would shorten your learning curve just a little.
I think it's shortening mine too. When I started reading your chapter on LA moms, can you tell us
Yes.
a little about your perception of that?
Sure. Well, it's a funny chapter, and I think the reality is that some people, especially when they're you're an entrepreneur or people who make it in the world, they say, "Oh, you're self-made. Oh, he's a self-made man. There's a self-made woman," and I gotta tell you, I don't think there's one person on the planet that's self-made. I think we all have help along the way. And there was this phase in my life where I decided, I'm going to do daily love and really see what's down that rabbit hole. I stepped away from the corporate culture and the music business on purpose. And I couch surfed basically for 2 years and ended up moving back in with my ex-girlfriend's parents. And, then I met some more friends. And then I moved in with my dear friend, Tommy Rosen. He was one of my LA moms, even though he was a man. He took care of me, and then after that, met a woman named Jan Shepard. Moved in with her for a month. After that, met a woman named Sophie Sheesh. Moved in with her for gosh, about 9 months to a year. And what was interesting is that each step of the way on the journey of creating this business, I didn't have a map. I didn't know how it was going to work out. I didn't really even have a business plan. It was just kind of like a one day at a time, kind of 12-step process. And what's fascinating is that the project sort of had a life of its own. And even though it was terrifying, and even though there were days where I didn't know where food was going to come from the next day, life had this very interesting way of showing up and supporting me in ways that I never really thought were possible. And so when I was, staying with other people, I think what I was really being taught was that, like you're not going to go broke, you're not going to go hungry. What you're doing is being supported, and I think it's a really powerful lesson for people who want to, you don't have to couch surf like me, but I think when you take a risk on behalf of something that you really are lit up about or passionate about or something that you really believe in or something in your heart that just stirs you that won't leave you alone. I think that's life or the universe, the divine or God or whatever you believe in speaking to you. And when you follow that, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be uncertain. But what I've come to see in my life and now in the lives of thousands of other people that we touch every day in our coaching programs and, literally hundreds of thousands and millions of people through our website is that life has this redemptive, supportive, nurturing, sort of attribute or quality to it that you don't hear about in the news cycle. If you turn on the news, Crisis News Network, you're going to think that the world's going to hell in a handbasket and everything's wrong and they're marketing you death and destruction. But if you tune that out for a little bit and get still and really focus on your meditation and getting in touch with the parts of you that really want to come forward, you'll see that most of that is it's true what's happening in the world, but it's not the only thing that's happening. And the reality is, good stories of redemption, stories of hope, and stories of entrepreneurial success aren't as newsworthy as the latest slang. And so, because we tend to, put our attention as human beings, we're hardwired to avoid danger rather than seek pleasure. So if there's a scary headline, everyone looks at it. Where if there's a positive headline, we don't tend to pay as much attention to it because our life is not in immediate danger. So we're all in this sort of this hypnosis, mass hypnosis that says, well, I got to be afraid, I got to be scared, life's not going to support me, it's a scary place. But the reality is, that's true. There's definitely atrocity in the world and tragedy, but there's also a redemptive quality to the universe that will support you when you really take big risks. I really believe that.
As you're speaking, I can hear the redemption in you. You see, people can talk, but if they're experiencing it, they're coming from their own knowledge. It really has, I think, a shift for others listening. The other thing is, you talked about your mother in your book and how she was such a great supporter, that you had a good foundation growing up. Also, you mentioned that your mother has her own challenges and you're there to support her. And what we're seeing today, Mastin, in our work, I have a book, Life is an Improv. We believe it is, or you would have been born with a script in your hand, and since you weren't, we're working it out. But
that's awesome.
But a lot of the moms today, they are either helicopter moms or they've disappeared, and kids are looking for their own autonomy, and many of them are not respectful of their family anymore. They're not going to be there for their mom when they're down. They don't want to be bothered. This whole collective consciousness is one I'd like you to maybe speak to, because it's pretty prevalent in the work that we do with so many young people.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm not a parent. I have no children that I know of. But I will tell you that, I work with parents a lot, and I think that we definitely have a parenting problem in our society, and I think in general we have an attention span problem. ADD and short attention spans and the way that our brains are being sort of stimulated today by technology and the 24-hour news cycle, and constantly being in fight or flight and all the sort of associated biochemistry of that with cortisol and adrenaline and epinephrine and all that stuff running through our system. We're in a different, stage of life now than we were, even 100 years ago. And if you look at the amount of content that we consume today more content in a week than our ancestors of 100 years ago consumed in their entire life. And so things are speeding up, and we have this sort of instant gratification, almost, expectation of how life should be. And while things are becoming more convenient, what we see over here in working with a lot of parents is that parents put the kids first. And I think at first that seems like the correct thing to do because they're your kids, you want to take care of them. But what that does unknowingly, A, is it disconnects the parent from their passion and their purpose and what they really want to do. It gives them a really good reason not to face uncertainty and to take risks on behalf of their dreams because, oh, I have the kids. And while I understand that having kids is very difficult and it completely changes your life, I've met plenty of parents who are entrepreneurs, who make it work, who are living their dreams. It just requires a different level of thinking about things. And what happens when you don't put your partner first, you don't put your passion first, and the kids go first, is you raise a generation of spoiled brats. And on top of that, they're not going to respect you because you're living a do as I say, not as I do lifestyle. And honestly, kids pay attention to what you do far greater than what you say. And I think that we, there's bills to pay, there's hard times, there's a huge wealth divide today. So I understand that having kids is not easy. I just saw a statistic the other day that a middle-aged family that has a child, over the course of that child going from being born to 18 years old, is going to spend $250,000 to raise that child. So it's an expensive endeavor, and we understand. But I also think that life has an abundant nature to it. And you can look at the work of Ray Kurzweil or Peter Diamandis at X Prize and the guys who are really on the forefront of science and technology. What they're seeing is a much more abundant world, not a scarcer world, through technology and through a lot of the personal growth modalities like the Daily Love and many others. And I think that what we teach our parents, not my parents, but what I teach the parents who come to me is like, get back in touch with what lights you up. Let's talk about the guilt and shame you feel about putting yourself first. And really, that's a mask. It's a socially acceptable mask in many cases to really just put a pause on your dreams. Because, well, I got kids. And like, no one's going to really say, oh, I understand that you have kids, but go live your dreams anyway. Most people will say, oh, I understand. Yeah, of course you don't live your dreams. And so I think have to take responsibility for how they've let their lives sort of go unchecked when it comes to dreams. And this conversation that we're having can be very triggering. It could be very like, oh, who are you to say? It's easy for you. You don't have kids, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is I've seen so many clients that have children that, bust their butt to really, set an example for them versus live in the do as I say, not as I do sort of mentality. And I think that when you put the relationship first, the kids will fall in line and you're actually going to demonstrate for them a healthy relationship, and they eventually will go out and model that.
I totally agree with you. And by the way, as a parent, the best conversation I ever had with my own son was I didn't say one word.
Yes.
And he said to me, he gave me a hug. He hadn't given me one in a week. And he said, this is the best conversation we ever had. And I sat there dumbfounded because I saw him.
Yes.
It wasn't all about do this, do that. We were rushing here. And the other point that you made, it's actually brilliant. Spoiled brats are actually given too much entitlement, and that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
an unrealistic.
And look, I used to be that way, so I understand, and I can tell you that, hard work, stick-to-itiveness, all those old school phrases from Napoleon Hill and the Carnegies and that old school personal growth stuff, like still applies today. It's a lot easier than it's ever been to scale business online. I think we're seeing in our world consistent six-figure earners transformed in entrepreneurs growing into seven figures. So the abundance that we're seeing is there, but the hard work still has to be there. And the other thing is, we're seeing what I see is I see on the ground. I'm talking to the everyday people all the time, and the other thing I'm seeing is this trend where men the gender male are becoming more feminine as an energy, and the gender of female are becoming more masculine as an energy. And we transfer that onto our children. So a lot of times you have these very masculine moms who put on a masculine mask because they had to survive. They're told don't count on a man, don't raise a man, and they're kicking butt at work. And they're raising the ranks. They're becoming managers and millionaires, and it's fantastic to see empowered women, really rising. But the problem is it's almost gone too far because what happens is they unknowingly emasculate their sons and don't educate them on how to be a proper masculine force as a boy and also raise very masculine daughters. And the same thing is true for the men. The men are becoming very feminine in that way. And so we're seeing this sort of depolarization of society. And so I think there's a lot to be said for, like, women for so long have been so suppressed. I mean, burned at the stake, and I mean, gosh, I mean the generational horror that's happened to the female gender for the last since the beginning of time
It's true.
um, has boiled up, and there's all this anger and tension, and it's now being released in the exact opposite, where women think that the most empowered version of being a female is acting like a man, but they're forgetting that the most feminine qualities like empathy and compassion and vulnerability are like 100 times more powerful than just masculine drive. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for successful women, successful female entrepreneurs, but I think that the world is going to shift when those feminine creatures step back into that nature and really reunite. And we see this all the time with women who, are very successful women, um, but at 10 o'clock at night when they go to bed, and they look over and they look at their pillow, the empty pillow next to them, they kind of wonder, well, where is he? And so there's a lot to be said with all this, how it relates to children, which is why I bring.
What's wonderful is that your earlier point, they're not nurturing their whole self. They're only living an aspect of their life, and you get on this train, and unless there's some big signal or something that comes along to knock you off of that whole mode you're on, you're going to wake up 10 years later, empty pillow, and even worse, an empty nest. And that's a
Yeah,
whole other subject.
exactly.
The kids are gone,
Yeah.
and maybe my dog still loves me. I don't know. Hopefully.
But
One other question, too. You said you were, at least I read somewhere, that you're a geek. What does
yes.
this mean in the context of Mastin here?
Well, I mean, I think it's funny. I communicate with the world every day through blogs and email and video and stuff. But the part of myself I don't really talk about is the sciencey science fiction guy. And I write my book about my love of Star Wars and Star Trek, and especially the next generation. Like, let's get real. Like, the original series was great, but the next generation, for people my age, just a phenomenal series. And I really think I love science and I love technology, and I just think that. I far much more identify with, like, pocket protectors than I do like football pads.
Okay. Good. And it really seems to serve you in how you are taking your business as an entrepreneur. You're also, you have your mission. You're going to affect a lot of people. You already have, and God knows how you're going to do curriculums. We need them in the schools, by the way. I just finished doing the ISTE, which is the biggest educational technology convention, and you should be their keynote next year for sure.
That's awesome.
Because they are affecting how, with technology, how we're moving the archaic educational system, which you know about. What you're doing, hope you're creating apps and everything where we can send kids also to other venues that you're doing. Speaking of that, where would you like us to send all of our people that are watching you now?
Oh, well, I would say the book is available. We have a lot of, especially when the book comes out September 9th. The book will be at growingintograce.com, growingintograce.com. We'll also have a bunch of training videos, because one of the number one questions we get asked is, what's my purpose? Like, why am I here? Like, what's the reason for my life? So I've created a sequence of actually 7 free videos that is sort of a master class in purpose and really how to figure out, and a lot of it's based on the work of Joseph Campbell, who I love and is in the book. So that'll be available after September 9th on growingintograce.com, along with all the information on how you can grab a copy of my book.
Great, and we're going to make sure we do that. I want to make sure now that Yeah, there is another personal question. You have this beautiful girlfriend,
Yes.
Jenna, and
Yes.
how is it that you apparently are working together? It seems so synchronistic. And can you tell us a little bit about real love in your life? I mean, you have love on many different levels.
Yeah, I think who was it? I think it was Judy Garland that said, I trade the love of one man for all the applause in the world. And I can tell you that, the sort of connection that I get from being with people in seminars, retreats, online in the comments and videos and email is fantastic. And every time someone says, this changed my life, like it's like the first time I hear that, and it really hits me hard. But nothing is more rewarding for me than like that personal connection and that deep love with Jenna, because it's relationships are not happily ever after. They're actually spiritual containers for growth. And when you go through those hard times, like what comes right after those hard times is even more intimacy and more connection. And to me, like that's what fuels me and allows me to really go out and do the work that I do.
Your mom must be so proud of you.
Aw.
I know I could just see her still pinching your cheeks
Ah.
because, you ooze love and you don't know much about the Beverly Hills Shaman.
Yeah.
We say that everyone is a shaman. And how you know you are is when you're in this frequency. Wherever you go and whoever you're with, it's better because you were there.
Yes,
And
love that.
when you're in this activity, which is the frequency of love, you're shamanizing.
Nice.
And you're a shaman. You do it every day. You're training people to be the same. And I just feel so much love for you right now because you ooze that.
Well,
And
so do you. It means a lot. I'm feeling that right here. It means a
yeah,
lot. Back at you.
and what we're going to do, of course, we'll invite you back, Mr. Busy Man. A lot of things here and all the places where you can be reached. We'll name it one more time. It's
Oh,
the website
yeah,
too,
everything is over at growingintograce.com.
growingintograce.com. I thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. You're
And if
so welcome.
and if you're a geek, hey guys and girls, let's go for it. Love and love, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thanks a lot. Bye.
Love, happy, happy, happy day. Love, 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 way. Merry way day.